Been working with the Ministry of Local Government Administration lately, and I've been doing some research. And what we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks is the United Nations Millennium Development Goals. But before we get to that, I just wanted to give you a little sense of what I did over Thanksgiving on Thursday, and then the weekend I actually took a visit to the house where Pushkin lived while he was in exile here. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So the readings this week have had to do with Russian culture and literature, and specifically Alexander Pushkin. I actually spent Thanksgiving at a dinner organized by the Peace Corps here in Moldova. There's actually about 200 Peace Corps around the country, and they come together on Thanksgiving and probably a few other holidays, but they come together on Thanksgiving and actually put on a huge Thanksgiving feast for themselves and for any Americans that want to come. So at this particular dinner, there was the ambassador, there were Fulbright scholars, there were other people from the embassy, and the 200 Peace Corps people. Altogether, there were probably a little over 300 of us. We sat down, they had turkey and delicious dressing and mashed potatoes and corn, different kind of pies. People actually brought pies, and it was just a real Thanksgiving meal with other Americans. Since we couldn't be with our families, we were with other Americans. Which is fitting because Americans are really the only ones that celebrate Thanksgiving. I mean, people all over the world celebrate Christmas, people celebrate Easter. The two that are really ours as Americans are Independence Day, July 4th, obviously, and Thanksgiving. Here what you see are, after the dinner, the Peace Corps actually put on sort of a comedy/talent show, and here the chairs were set up, and that's the audience. And there you can see one of the acts on stage performing. The gentleman standing there in the foreground with the pink shirt on and the beard, his name is Jeff Kelly Clark. He's actually the country director for the Peace Corps here in Moldova. And one of the things that you do when you're at these dinners is obviously have a lot of fun and it's entertaining. But, for example, I met with Mr. Kelly Clark while I was there, and we talked about how Peace Corps people could come out and speak to my students at the Academy of Public Administration. So things like this with Americans getting together is good for a variety of reasons, one of which is networking. So on the Saturday after Thanksgiving, I was trying to keep up this feeling that this was a holiday weekend for me the way it is for you folks back there. And so I thought, I'll do something touristy and then share it. And so what I did is I'd known that Alexander Pushkin had been in Moldova and that I knew that there was some sort of museum here at the house that he lived in. And I hadn't bothered to look it up or find where it was yet, but I did walk down and sort of on a back street in the downtown area. It was probably a 15-minute walk, maybe 20-minute walk from my apartment. And I came in. They were very nice to me, although they didn't speak English. They mostly spoke Russian, although they probably could have done Romanian as well. And the one lady actually asked me if I spoke German, so she might have had a little German. I understood enough Russian to know that she was asking me if I spoke German. So this shows you, this is the front entrance to the cottage where Pushkin lived, and the next few pictures are actually going to be inside this cottage. If you've read the information, you know that Pushkin was fairly young when he was exiled to here. He actually had his first poem published when he was only 15. And by the time he was 21, he already had a reputation for being a little rebellious. And so because he was part of the ruling class, the czars, the kings in Russia, pretty much could tell them where they could go and where they should live and what they should be doing as part of being part of that class. And so Pushkin got sent to Chisinau, Moldova, which was pretty much in the middle of no place even then, even more so then, I guess, would be one way of looking at it. A cottage away from things where he couldn't cause much trouble was the idea. Here's a picture of Pushkin in case you didn't run across one in the readings. He's considered, was and still is, considered Russia's greatest romantic poet. One of the interesting things is, one of the reasons that he is so widely respected in Russia and in the Russian-speaking world, which Moldova is included, is because he actually helped bring Russian back as a language. in his time, in the early 1800s, most of the nobility of Russia and of Europe in general spoke French. And Russian was considered to be sort of the language of the people that common people would speak, but not anybody who was educated would be educated in French. And Pushkin, by writing poetry that was considered wonderful at the time, and like I said, still is, in Russian, single-handedly brought back a respect for the language. There are a few very specific poems that he wrote while he was here, and one of the souvenirs I got actually was a book called Pushkin in Moldova, which explains all that, but I'm going to have to wait till I learn Russian a little better to read it, since the whole book is in Russian. But he wrote a few poems here about the area, and he started some of his greatest works while he was here, apparently while sitting at this desk and writing. Like I said, this was a fascinating experience for me because I went by myself, didn't bring a translator. So the Russian guide that was showing me around, there were only 3 of us there, he was showing around. It's a fairly small place, fairly unsophisticated by Western standards. As you can see, you pretty much have access to truly irreplaceable artifacts in a way that in most American museums you wouldn't. They were very nice to me. They worked through it as much as they can. When it came time to bring souvenirs, I took the amount of money out of my pocket that I wanted to spend. She took what she wanted and gave me. I ended up with 3 books, all in Russian, 2 of which are supposedly things he wrote here and one's about him being here, a nice little pin, and a poster, which was pretty much all the souvenirs that she had there. She didn't really bring me into a souvenir shop. She brought the souvenirs to me. So it was kind of an interesting experience. I might go back with a translator at some point to learn more of the fine points about what's going on there. But as you can see, this kind of stuff is really fascinating, and I tend to like history anyway, so I enjoyed it very much. Oh, and by the way, the 3 books, the pin and the poster, all the souvenirs she had there, the amount of money she took from me, which was about 120 lei, which is about $9, $8 or $9 is all, so it was fairly inexpensive. Tourist trap, if that's what it was meant to be. This guy ended up with this picture. This is behind his little house there. You can see the gate back there that goes outside. This is a nice wooded area. It was still pretty warm. It was about 60 degrees here that day when I went for a walk. The sun was starting to set by the time I took this picture, so there's a lot of shadows. But I can see he had a nice, peaceful, quiet life there in this little cottage in the middle of Moldova in his youth. It is too bad. You may have read that he died fairly young at 38 in a duel over some supposed slight to his wife, or however that worked out. So he didn't live as long as he could have, but still, I thought this was an interesting little side trip in my time in Moldova. I hope